Tanse, Jordyn Burnouf, Nehîyaw Iskwew. So my name is Jordyn Burnouf. I come from the Cree name of my community is Île-á-la, which translates to where the rivers open up, otherwise known as Crosse, and that's located in northern Saskatchewan. I am Nehîyaw. I'm a Cree woman, and I come from Black Lake First Nation as well. And I am, in my day job, I'm advisor to the vice president of the Métis Nation, and I'm also co-chair of SevenGen, an Indigenous Youth Council, and I sit on the board of Indigenous Clean Energy. So I guess where my story and my connection to climate action and doing work for the environment started when I was a young girl. I think being raised by, my mother and my grandmothers, it really stems from just those simple values that were instilled in me from my kukum, where as a little girl I'd try and just go pick flowers and she would say, no, do you need that? What's your reason? And that flower has a place in this ecosystem and it helps all of these other beings to exist. And so, that really started to instill this understanding for this full cycle that we're a part of, right? And we contribute to that. And what kind of an impact do you want to leave on this earth? I think the connection between environmental justice and reconciliation, it all kind of starts with our shared history and our understanding of relationships. I'm wearing an orange shirt today because I sat with residential school survivors. I am the granddaughter of a residential school survivor, residential school survivors. All my grandparents are survivors. And I think, just looking at that alone, we look at the impacts that, land, these power systems that exist within our society, assimilation and colonization that's occurred in our country, and you look at the impact of residential schools, they still exist, right? I'm still impacted. I was crying all day because I was triggered by my kukum's experience that she was associated with a lot of the discussions today, and these impacts still exist. They're still very real. My kukum is past now, but these are things that a lot of people in our societies are still experiencing today. And the connection between reconciling, what's happened in what's known as Canada and where we want to go with our future, we have to look at a just transition, and that includes all people, that includes BIPOC people, and that includes people that have been the most impacted by what has happened in Canada. And until we acknowledge and recognize and find a pathway to resolve, the atrocities that have happened in Canada, I don't know if we can really truly create an equitable opportunity for people to be involved, right? If we don't truly understand what has happened, how can we meaningfully involve people in this transition? And one of the most important things that we're going to do in our near future and right now in every decision-making process is make decisions for the environment, and that needs to include Indigenous people, because we were displaced because of land, we were displaced for resources. All of the, everything to do with residential schools, everything to do with land back. A lot of the protests and things that are happening in Canada right now directly related to climate justice. And so until we acknowledge and recognize everybody's place in that fight, we won't see the change that needs to be made, and that includes systems change. That includes the foundational pieces of how we govern ourselves, how people are treated in terms of our justice system, child welfare. All of these things are very much interconnected, and the land and environment and climate plays a heavy role in that. Because a lot of the wealth in Canada and in countries all around the world are directly related to natural resources and therefore energy. And so how are we including people in this work? That is, if not the most important thing that we need to consider. I think some of the greatest lessons I've learned in climate, let's call it climate proactivism, you know, it's a hard space to exist in. As a woman, it's a hard space to exist in. As an Indigenous person, it's a hard space to exist in. And as a young person, it's a really tough space to exist in. But there's a space for you to exist there. And that's the number one thing that you need to remember is, you know, the value and your worth and you being there is so absolutely powerful. And, you know, it might be really intimidating. It might be, you know, something that you question and you feel this like imposter syndrome or, you know, all of these like insecurities and thoughts that run through your head when you're going to new spaces and you know, when you're the youngest person in the room or you're the only person at a board table, you know, things like that. Like, those are definitely like, those are common feelings. Know that that's normal. What I'll ask for you or challenge you to do is not to devalue your voice because, you know, it is worth so much more than you can ever imagine. You know, when young people are involved in different things, I often try to ask the question of like, why? You know, is this a token role that you're offering here? Is this like to have a youth voice involved, you know, and why? And so challenge people when they include you in those spaces and ask the why. Because if you're not meaningfully involved and if you're not actively included in the conversations and the decisions that are made, then that something needs to change, right? There needs to be a shift in understanding and appreciation of your voice in that space. And so don't be afraid to raise your voice and just be there and exist in a really big way.